Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris from AppSumo, and I could not be more excited to be joined by Chris Voss. We are going to be diving into a whole bunch today. Chris, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. This is going to be good.
Awesome. So let me give everybody a quick background. It's a bit extensive for Chris, so we can all ground ourselves, know where we're starting. So everything in life is a negotiation. This is the mantra that Chris Voss, the former lead international crisis negotiator for the FBI, lives by. He's convinced kidnappers to release their hostages, terrorists to give up information, and bank robbers to come out with their hands up. After 24 years in the FBI, Chris launched the Black Swan Group, a premier consulting firm that trains clients such as law enforcement, Harvard law students in business schools or businesses around the globe in the art of high-stakes negotiation. His Wall Street Journal bestseller, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it, flipped the entire world of negotiation on its head. And today I could not be more excited to be sitting down with Chris and talking about how anybody can use these subtle but incredibly powerful tools of negotiation to improve their everyday lives. Chris, thank you very much.
Yeah, man, happy to be here. This is going to be good. Let's talk about some interesting stuff.
All right, let's get into it. So one of the things that I saw, your masterclass trailer at least has 5 million views on it, which is more than Samuel L. Jackson, Bob Iger, Martin Scorsese, and Usher, which is pretty wild. Like, what is it about what you're teaching that you think is really resonating with people?
Well, it's applicable, right? It's negotiation is an opportunity to make your life better right now. I mean, people that we teach, in fact, are making their lives better on a weekly basis. Somebody tells us this deal is going to change my life, and that's a cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You start the book with what I thought was a really funny story about how when you went to the I guess the Harvard Law School winter negotiation course, and there were all of these Harvard law students who are brilliant people, and you're just kind of wiping the floor with them with some of the basic things that you had been doing at the FBI. Can you kind of walk through that story?
Yeah, I guess the great thing about that is that it demonstrates the superiority of intellectual EQ, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. The superiority of emotional intelligence over intellectual intelligence, EQ over IQ. I mean, and that's hostage negotiation. That is just highly evolved emotional intelligence, which anybody can develop those skills. I mean, I really developed them more on a crisis hotline before I was a hostage negotiator. My son has developed the skills. He's extraordinary at it. So EQ beats IQ every time. And the Harvard Law School students were IQ guys, really giant brains, big intellect. You get into Harvard Law School by scoring really high on the LSAT. I mean, by knocking it absolutely out of the park. The test of your intellectual capacity. You put somebody who's street smart with EQ in there, and you win. EQ wins, and that was kind of it. They were flummoxed. They didn't know how to handle an EQ, an emotionally intelligent response to their IQ questions, and I could, without them knowing it, I could run them in circles.
So what specifically were you doing to kind of overcome all of the, I guess, the books and the theories and everything like that they had been trained on?
Yeah, the simplest question, which was the most powerful, was how am I supposed to do that? That's one of the ways that we teach people in a Black Swan method. That's how we teach people. It's one of the ways to say no. We got 4 ways to say no. You let out no a little at a time. You let out no in a way that causes the other side to collaborate. They don't realize it. You say to somebody, how am I supposed to do that? Well, they start giving you ideas. All right, so here's how you could do it. Here's how you could do this. But they didn't realize that you burdened them with the problem that they try to shove off on you. I mean, burden the creator of the problem with the problem in a way that's deferential. And how am I supposed to do that? I mean, people instantly make a difference in their lives and their ability to negotiate just by mastering that phrase.
Because it seems like people expect you to come and attack them. And instead, you're just like, hey, I want to collaborate, but how am I supposed to do that? I feel like my hands are tied. Can you show me the way forward?
Yeah, and that's all the things that they hear from just a simple sentence of how am I supposed to do that? The simple question. You don't say all those things. You don't ask people questions to get an answer. You ask them questions to trigger thoughts in their head, to plant thoughts in their head. And all the subsequent things that you just said, my hands are tied, I'd love to collaborate, I just can't do it. Those are all the things that the other side thinks when you say to them, how am I supposed to do that? And it's a deferential question.
Mhm. So where did this idea develop that like negotiation needs to be really hostile, where you're coming in hard and they're coming in hard, and it's just going to be like a battle of brute force?
Yeah, that is a great question. I wish I could figure that out. I mean, but it's definitely there. And that is exactly what everybody imagines. When whoever's listening to this, you think about what negotiation you're faced with. When you run it through your head, you picture an argument. It's either an argument with the person that you're going to be engaged with, or if you imagine a person, you always picture somebody that's argumentative. I mean, whether you like the president or not, Donald Trump, he's an argumentative guy, and everybody pictures the aggressive attacking negotiator on the other side.
But I guess there's three types of negotiators that you talk about. So there's the really aggressive one, which seems to be, what everybody thinks of as the stereotypical negotiator, but there's two other types as well.
Yeah, that's the poster child. Everybody imagines they're gonna get into a fight with the other side. They're gonna argue. Yeah, and so the world splits evenly. Interestingly enough, the world splits evenly into the three types: fight, flight, make friends. And these are, from our caveman days. These are the cavemen that survived when faced with a threat on the jungle path, the saber-toothed tiger. You either fought it, you ran from it, you made friends with it. The caveman couldn't decide what to do, got eaten. So, and it's an idea that originally derived from Harvard, and they used something called the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, which breaks people down into 5 conflict types. Now, my Harvard brothers and sisters threw two of the categories out and would stick to just 3. And I remember asking Bob Mnookin up there, who's running a program, why 3 instead of 5? And he said, we believe that 2 of those 5 types are learned, the 3 of the 3 basic. And so we started in my company, my son and I, we started, we looked at the test and we thought, all right, we're going to change this a little bit. We're going to change the names around, but effectively still stay with the 3 types. We probably tested 10,000 people globally. I mean, literally from China to Iraq to Saudi Arabia to Brazil, and found that it's pretty much true, regardless of gender or ethnicity. You're one of those 3 types, and the world breaks pretty evenly into thirds.
So it seems like it's probably even more important to know the type of the person you're negotiating with, even more so than like what type you are, because that's really what you want to hone your strategy around. Is that right?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's really both, because each one of the types has really good attributes that they bring to negotiation prowess, negotiating capacity, if you will. I mean, you got to be assertive. I mean, if you and I are going to make a deal and you want to deal with me, and 7, 8 out of 10 people want to deal with us, the vast majority of the people we're faced with actually want to deal with us, not against us. Mm-hmm. You need me to tell you what I need. If I expect you to read my mind, that mind reading ain't going to be that accurate. So you actually need me to come out and tell you what I need to have to make a great deal. Otherwise, it's a great deal is only going to come by accident. So you need me to be assertive. Now, you don't want me to be a jerk about it. You don't want to feel like you've gotten hit in the face with a brick by the way that I assert. That's where the make friends type comes in. The make friends type wants the things that they say to land without causing harm. First do no harm. They don't want the words to cause harm. And if my words feel like blunt force trauma to you, you're going to reject them just out of defensiveness. Now, the third type, the flight type. Flight type, that guy or gal is highly analytical. I mean, they're thinkers. They like thinking options through. They like generating a lot of possible ideas and solutions. There, you need that. We got to brainstorm together. So each one of those types are necessary for you to get better. What are the complementary skills that you need? Now, on the other side, yeah, that was your original question. Do I need to know what the other side is? Yeah, because the negotiation's most likely going to break down at impasse over mismatch in type. We're both sure we're right when in fact we're probably reacting as a type. And so if you know the other side's type, you get a better feel for how they misunderstand the things that you said.
And I felt like one of the details within that you talk about within the types is just how each of them interprets silence, where the
Right.
aggressive type interprets it as like, oh, I should keep talking, versus the analytical type thinks, no, I need this silence to be able to kind of process things. And then again, it's just this butting of heads.
Yeah, exactly. And then the relationship oriented type, when silence is like, oh my God, they're mad. Oh my God, it's so they freak out.
Yeah.
So, and it's as you said, it's as simple as something as a moment of silence in a negotiation.
Mm-hmm. So earlier you were mentioning your experience on the crisis hotline. That was kind of early on in your career, from what I understand, as you were transitioning into kind of the FBI negotiation side of things.
Right.
What was that experience like? Like, how did you develop those skills? What did you learn while you were doing that?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the training was great. The experience was great. I learned a lot. I mean, I added skills and understanding to dealing with people that I never had before. I learned really early on the power of empathy. Ridiculous. It's insane. And the other crazy thing was empathy actually saves time. The application of tactical empathy, why, people think, we should cry on each other's shoulders, we should hug each other, and, we should commiserate. And that sounds like a tremendous waste of time. First of all, it's not crying and hugging and all that nonsense. It's not sympathy. And secondly, it accelerates things. Like the crazy thing that they told us as far as the accelerant is on the hotline was, you won't be on the phone with anybody for more than 20 minutes. And I remember thinking like, wait a minute, in the movies, somebody's suicidal, they talk to them for hours. How is it that we're going to get this done in 20 minutes? And he said, no, if you use empathy right, you'll get to a solution really fast. You'll be shocked at how quickly it goes. And that was really the thing that I learned from it. And one of the main reasons it applies to business is because who's got time to waste, especially today during a pandemic, a global economic shutdown. It's the craziest time the world has ever experienced. The only time the United States has ever been united in an effort in the past was when there were actual military conflict, one of the world wars. Absent actual violence, this is a nation or world's response to war. So there's been nothing like this before. We don't get time to waste, spinning our wheels.
So to get into some of the labeling, which is really powerful, and what ties into kind of what you were talking about with the crisis negotiation. And I heard you and Derek saying this on a webinar recently about how you can't plant an idea in someone's head and make them think it if it's not already there. Like if you're like, are you thinking about taking your own life? They're not going to now start thinking that they are if they're not. But yeah, if you could kind of go into how labeling works in some of the fears or misperceptions people have about that.
Yeah, all right. So what's a label? A label is if you say it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, or you seem, you sound, you look. You might say, it feels like. It's meant as a self-defining skill. You're putting a label on an emotion or a dynamic that you've heard in the conversation. And you've been labeling me already a little bit some in this conversation, which I've been very impressed by. So yeah, you got to use it in everyday conversation to get good at it anyway. It just has to be part of your vernacular to use it in a negotiation. Now, for lack of a better...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Your
No,
question.
please. I was going to ask how you can do some of that low stakes practice, but I want to hear a fuller explanation of this if you have one.
Yeah, sure. So then a label is you label an emotion or a dynamic, and it could be really general. Like, I won't say, what are you thinking? I'll say, seems like you probably got some ideas. Now, and those two are completely different in triggering brainstorming. If I say to you, what are you thinking? You think like, oh, okay, I got to come up with some good ideas here. What am I thinking? Holy cow. I don't know. I gotta sound smart here. Somebody asked me a question. I got to sound smart. All that's going to go through your head. You're going to try to come up with a really good answer. If I say, seems like you got some ideas, you'll instead immediately tap into your ideas and start giving me a flow of consciousness. You go like, yeah, as a matter of fact, here's what I was thinking. And you're going to start laying all that out. You're not going to feel that you have to meet a standard, which a question will often make you feel. Or another great one, if you say something that is just like, I think is nuts or wrong. Well, first of all, intellectually, I got to be smart enough to know that you might have a perspective that I don't have. You might know something that I don't know. So I can't be completely right if I think you're nuts or you're wrong. What I need to do is find out, what makes you say that. And I could say what makes you say that. Or I could say, seems like you got a reason for saying that. And you'll just start to let it all out without even thinking about it. And then I'll have the opportunity, like if I disagree with everything you said after my label, you'll still feel pretty good for having shared that with me. Seek first to understand, then be understood, the Stephen Covey advice. I drew out an understanding of you, so now I can make my points. I could disagree with everything you say after you laid it all out, and you'll hear me out because you felt heard out in the first place, which now means we got traction in our conversation. We're not wasting time.
I love that. I love the, so it sounds like you have a reason for saying that. And I think you talk about that in the scope of talking about fairness, where if someone says something's unfair and you can be, well, it sounds like you have evidence to back that up. Maybe that's a bit more aggressive than you would say it, but yeah.
No, but you're completely on track. I mean, if somebody said, look, that's unfair, I'd say, sounds like you have a reason for saying that. Now you skipped ahead a little bit because.
Hey, sorry.
No, that's cool, because when somebody says something isn't fair, generally they really don't have any evidence. Because if they did, they'd tell you. They just flat out say it. They'd say, all right, here's why you're wrong, and here's my evidence. But people always say that not only when they don't have any evidence, but actually the evidence is kind of against them. The first time I ever noticed this, because fair is the F-bomb, people drop it in negotiations all the time. A really good friend of mine is involved in a real estate negotiation, and this person is a wonderful human being. She is ultimately one of the fairest, most decent people I know. She's in a top 10. She's phenomenal. Her and her husband are selling their house in the midst of what had previously been a hot market and had started to decline. So the house wasn't worth as much as it used to be. Now the buyers come in with an offer on the house that's in line with the market. Not the way the market used to be, but the way it is now. And, she said, we just want what's fair. And the buyer raised their price. Now, what's fair about that? It wasn't the buyer's fault that the market went down. The buyer made an offer in line with the existing market. She said, we just want what's fair. In point of fact, the data was against her, because the data was, this was a fair price, the market's gone down. If the market was hot, she'd have said, hey, have you guys looked at the market? The market's much higher than what you're offering. You need to get in line with the market. She wouldn't have to draw on the F-bomb. But when the other side has felt the tide turn against them, all right, so what does that mean to you? What's this long thing mean? Somebody drops that, they're vulnerable emotionally, and you got to be careful with that information. They're letting you know right now they feel weak, they feel defenseless, and you need to carefully move through that negotiation. Otherwise, their resentment is going to cause it to blow up.
And so much of this is about when you get in, people see negotiation as very conflict riddled, but a lot of these strategies are basically ways to diffuse that, where if somebody says, hey, this is unfair, you get defensive and then you want to come back and explain all of the reasons it is fair, or it's unfair in your direction, versus so many of these approaches are like, whoa, sidestep all of the defensiveness and go deeper, so you can use that tactical empathy to kind of uncover what's going on underneath the surface and guide it to your point of view.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, very well said, because most people's reaction is to counterattack back because you've just been called a name. Somebody says, we just want what's fair. The reason that punches people's buttons is if they've implied that you're unfair, which is going to offend your sense of justice. Now you start shooting back. What does this really break down? If the other side's vulnerable, shouldn't you move in for the kill? No, because you're going to drive them from the table is an extremely high possibility. And I hate not making deals I should have made. And driving somebody from the table is not in your best interest. Or number two, they're actually in implementation, they're going to fight you every step of the way. Yes is nothing without how. Even any kind of sale, the other side is always going to be able to fight you. Real estate deal, you got I can't think of the term now, when it goes into
Escrow.
Escrow. Thank you very much. You know, if it goes in escrow and you have inspections, and you know how many real estate deals break down. You know, a $500,000 house going to break down over a $1,500 repair. That's stupid, but it happens every day. You know, so let's say the other side feels vulnerable and you're buying a car. All right, so the car turns out to be a lemon, and you want to go back to who you bought it from. You know, you buy a car from a private seller, and it turns out to have real serious problems that you didn't know about. If you kill them on a price, you know, they're not going to answer the phone. You buy it from a dealer. I mean, I got a story I'm pretty proud of in my book about, you know, how I bought my
yeah, I'd love to go into this.
Yeah, but I got to tell you something. I killed them so bad on that price. They originally, you know, in their advertising said, whenever you come in for a repair, we'll give you a rental loaner for free. So the first time I went in for the repair, I had a buddy pick me up, so I didn't need the rental loaner. And the second time I went in for a repair, I needed that loaner. And they were like, oh, no. You had your opportunity. You missed it. Well, you know, they're reneging on follow-up terms, that anything that they were vague on, they can go, hey, you didn't understand. So, you know, you take advantage of somebody when they're vulnerable, they're gonna pay you back. And if they don't get a chance to pay you back, they can tell their friends, and their friends are going to try to pay you back on their behalf. So, you know, what goes around comes around.
Yeah, and I imagine that's a bigger problem for those more aggressive types, where they do kind of want to get the hardest deal they can get. And if you're dealing with someone who's a bit more passive aggressive, it's like they're going to find other ways to take it out on you. If they can't, you know, be as combative as you, they're going to do it under the table.
You know, and every aggressive negotiator ends up burning out everybody in their world. And, you know, this is a thing that a lot of people don't realize about Donald Trump. But he burned out everybody in New York, and they all stopped dealing with him. Donald Trump, the West Side Railroad Yards, which has been developed into a phenomenal development these days. And again, I'm getting mental blanks on the name of that part of town now, but I was over there recently, and it is fantastic. Well, Donald Trump owned that in the 1980s, and he got so many people, community organizations, builders, nobody would do business with him. Everybody united in opposition, and he owned the West Side Railroad Yards for like 20 or 30 years, unable to put up any sort of a building, any sort of a development there whatsoever, because he made everybody so mad at him that they were all passively aggressive against him. You know, never be mean to somebody who could hurt you by doing nothing. Everybody in New York started doing nothing. You know, they wouldn't cooperate with him. They wouldn't fight him, but they simply were mean to him by doing nothing. And finally, he sold out his interest, and that part of town remained undeveloped for 20 years because Donald Trump's name was on it, and nobody would cooperate. And as soon as he got out and finally sold his interest in it, people flocked to it and made it one of the most beautiful real estate developments in Manhattan. It's what happens to the aggressive negotiator. People start getting back at you by failing to cooperate.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like the advice for them then is, just because you can bulldoze somebody in the immediate, it doesn't mean that it's going to pay for you in the long run.
Yeah, don't be short-term greedy. You know, long-term greedy is preserving relationships. There was a famous Goldman Sachs executive, Gus Levy, I believe was the guy's name, who was famous for saying, greedy, yes, but long-term greedy. You need good relationships to prosper in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next part is the one that I have a hard time with. So this is a very selfish question, but How do you get over the awkwardness of using the late night FM DJ voice? Because I just can't do it. And I'd love to hear your technique for that and kind of what it is.
Yeah, well, the late night FM DJ voice is the calming, soothing voice of the hostage negotiator. You know, we spent a lot of time just learning that voice. I mean, I came across it sort of accidentally when I was on a crisis hotline because, you know, I was really worried about doing really well and listening. And the first time I was on the line, it was called Helpline. And I remember I just answered the phone. I just went, "Hello, this is Helpline." And afterwards, the person coaching me was like, "Hey, wow, your voice is great. Your voice is really good, man." And I remember thinking like, I don't know what I did. I got to think about it. But it actually creates a neural response in the other person. It actually physically calms somebody's brain down. It triggers a chemical reaction. You know, we know about neuroscience these days. It actually calms the brain down. And, you know, it's just a downward inflecting voice. It's a voice of confidence. It's a voice that great news broadcasters have. Tucker Carlson's got a great calming, soothing, confident voice. I mean, and there's no shortage of newscasters that have that voice. I mean, it's a great voice, and it inspires confidence in people. And a lot of people struggle with that. They either feel awkward with it. You know, I feel like I'm not being myself if I use this voice. And it's just a matter of getting your repetitions and getting your practice in, and also seeing the impact it has on a person you're using it with. It'll calm them down. And that's why hostage negotiations tend to be calmer than business negotiations, which is a bizarre thought if you think about it. Because we use that voice all the time. In business deals, people attack each other all the time, and they have blow-ups, people slamming their hands on the table and walking out. I mean, there are more blow-ups reported in business deals than there were ever reported in a hostage negotiation. It's principally because of that voice.
Mm-hmm. And I think that can come into play a lot too, in like when you're dealing with family and friends, where things can also get super, you know, elevated, and someone starts speeding up and talking quicker, and then you want to do the same thing, and it's like, instead of telling them to calm down, which is just going to get them upset, it's just, if you just slow down yourself, and then it kind of, then they just, I don't know, they start feeling like they should slow down as well.
Yeah, 1,000%. And the other cool thing about that voice is it actually calms you down too.
Mm.
I mean, if I find myself getting lit up in a conversation, if I flip over to that voice, if I switch to it, it'll actually work on me too, because I'm going to hear my own voice, and it's going to hit my mirror neurons the same way it's going to hit yours,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to calm me down. So it's a great way to calm yourself down too.
Awesome. So how do you get some of that, like that low stakes practice where you could be using this voice, or you could be using some of the questions or the labeling and the mirroring? Like, what do you recommend to people so they can get those reps in?
Yeah, your Lyft driver, you know, your waiter, your waitress, anybody you get on the phone with, any conversation, small stakes conversations, when you get nothing at stake, any conversation, you know, try it out, see what happens, test drive it, kick the tires, see what kind of an impact that has. The other side doesn't have to be upset for you to try the late night FM DJ voice. You know, whoever you talk to your mom, call your mom today. Say, "Mom, how are you?" You see what happens, you know. And as a matter of fact, you know, in coronavirus times when we're making a lot more phone calls and we need to be checking in with people just to make sure they're okay, you know, do a check-in call with somebody you care about. Start out with the late night FM DJ voice, and keep it up till they go like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
I was thinking about that though, because now does seem to be such a good time to practice some of this, like what you're saying, calling friends and family, but also say you're calling like an airline to cancel flights that you needed, or a credit card company or whatever. I imagine doing these things over the phone, while you're losing some of the dimensionality, you're also like, it can be a bit more comfortable for you to practice this stuff because you're not standing face to face.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And you know, imagine yourself doing it before you make the call. Because that's a rehearsal in and of itself. I mean, you fall to your highest level of preparation. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your highest level of preparation. And how you imagine something going down before you do it is a means of preparation. Like if you imagine yourself not being able to stick to the voice, that's a preparation for you to do exactly what you imagined. Or if you imagine the other side getting angry with you, and then you coming out of the voice as a result of their anger, that's preparation. So imagine a negative reaction, and then imagine continuing with the voice. That's the kind of preparation you want to go through.
Perfect. So can you tell me about the problem with getting to yes, or trying to go towards yes?
That's one of my pet peeves. I mean, getting yes out of people is the worst thing you can do. You know, and there's some nonsense that's been existing out there called yes momentum, or the momentum selling. Now, on the one hand, I'm glad that this has never gone away, nor will it ever go away, because everybody that we coach and train, and when we get them out of it, it's instantly they're more competitive. I mean, it's probably the worst habit out there, and it's pervasive. So momentum selling, what is that? What is that nonsense? It's if you get somebody saying yes, it's like they're hypnotized, and they got to keep saying yes. You know, every single confirmation yes is a tie down. And then ultimately, when you back them into the corner you want them in, they have to say yes in order to be consistent with the other yeses that they've already given you. I mean, this is so bad. You know, would you like to make more money? Would you like to have more free time? Would you like to live in a big house? Well, buy my sales program. Everybody's been hammered by that. Everybody's yes battered. I mean, maybe there was a point in time in your life when you were gullible, and somebody said, would you like to make more money? And you went, yeah. And then they said, well, wow, would you like to have a really expensive car? And you went, yeah. And then they said, would you like to have a beautiful girlfriend or beautiful, handsome boyfriend and live in a really big house? And you went, yeah. And then they went, okay, buy my self-improvement program. And you went, where do I sign? How much? I don't care how much it is. Wow, I got to have it. I mean, maybe you were conned by that sometime in the past. And then you bought that stupid program and you're like, hey, this is nonsense. This is crap. I can't do this. I mean, this is nonsense. And then maybe you did it one or two other times. Like, I think when I was about 20, I bought this stupid coupon book for $25. It was supposed to be worth like $25,000. And I couldn't figure out how to use any of those stupid coupons. It was like, you know, buy this at the dollar store, you know, at midnight on Tuesday. I mean, it was stupid, but I got conned. So everybody's been conned by this at some point in time. And everybody out there is yes battered. In a minute, somebody tries to get you to say yes, and your first thought now is, instead of going like, yeah, you go like, oh, wait a minute. All right, where's the hook? Where's this going? There's a catch here. Every time this happened to me in the past, there's a catch. And the problem with people who are yes battered, you know, I use the battered child analogy all the time. You try to hug a child who's been battered. Let's say you're a good person and you want to give them a warm embrace. And you know that in point of fact, it's been demonstrated that hugs are actually good for people. A hug, a warm embrace, creates a neurological response that actually heals the body. So let's say you're in possession of this data and you want to heal a battered child. You know, I'm here to tell you, you go to hug that battered child and you raise your arms, that battered child is gonna flinch. It does not matter what your intention was. And it does not matter if you're trying to apply something that you know is good for the other side. They've been battered in advance. They are gonna pull away from you. And everybody on the planet has been yes battered.
So what do you do if yes doesn't work?
Yeah, well, there you go, right? That's the question. You know, hopefully a lot of people watching this are going like, well, now what am I supposed to do?
Well, because it makes you think of like, you know, a small town person going to a big city and someone stops them on the corner and they're like, hey, do you have a minute to chat? And the first time you do it, you're like, yeah, what's going on? But then after a couple of those, it's just like you become jaded. And then as soon as somebody has that jaded shield up, they're never going to respond to those yeses. So instead, what are the options?
Yeah, exactly. And so as stupid as it sounds, change your question so the answer is no. I mean, we spend a fair amount of time coaching people out of yes-oriented questions into no-oriented questions. Do you have a few minutes to chat? Becomes is now a bad time. I mean, and that is everybody that we've taught. When they call people on the phone, they say it's now a bad time to talk. No, it's not a bad time. Or one of the things that I loved is, I'm watching on LinkedIn, people who are yes addicts. If you're a yes addict, I'm going to say it even harder. You're a yes crackhead. You're a yes crackhead. And there's this post on LinkedIn that somebody put up, I tried this and I said, is now a bad time to talk? And they said yes. And I thought, do you want to talk to somebody when they just told you it's a bad time? What are you smoking? That you want to do your sales pitch after they say, yeah, it's a bad time. Now, the context of that whole conversation is never give them a chance to say, yes, it's a bad time. Well, you're not going to change the time for them. You're only going to become aware of what the time is for them. So if you are horrified at that same yes to them, what you're saying is, now I'm going to give my sales pitch, whether it's a good time for them or not. It's the worst time in the world to give your sales pitch. You got to be kidding me. You are a crackhead for yes if that's what your approach is to people. And that's why they're not going to pick up the phone next time you call.
The no-oriented questions are probably the thing that has changed my life the most in the past, I think, 2 months since I read the book.
Wow.
In every email or something like that I'm sending out now, it's what I've been using, and it's what I've been using to land some fantastic guests like yourself for this, where we're kind of the end of the email pitch for the interview is like, would it be ridiculous to see if we could make this happen? And it's just crazy that the results have completely flipped upside down, and it just feels like a little secret weapon that nobody knows about. And as soon as you turn it around, would it be impossible to do this? Would it be too much to ask if? Would it be ridiculous if we did this? And it's one of those things that feels awkward, but once you do it and you see how powerful it is, it's mind blowing.
It is a secret weapon. We were doing a training a couple of years ago with this a large hospital holding corporation. And one of their executives was trying to get a head nurse in a hospital to agree to this program they wanted to implement. And it had been completely, it was a female negotiator on both sides, she'd been completely asking yes questions. So we do the block of instruction in the middle of the afternoon about changing your yeses to no. And she goes, really? And she gets up out of the room and she goes and calls the head nurse on the phone and says, are you against implementing this program? And the head nurse says, no, I'm not against it. Let's see what we can do. She walks back into the room and says, you guys are not going to believe what just happened. That's how instantaneous it is. And I think it's awesome that you found that secret weapon and you're using it in your life.
Yeah. Well, the first time I heard you say it was actually on a podcast with Kevin Rose, and you were telling the Robert Herjavec story. And yeah. I was at the gym listening to it, and I stepped out of the gym to send a follow-up email to a project that I was working on, and just shot out that email. And then, I hopped on a call with him the next day, and it was just, it's such an easy, something people can do today for the next email they send or the project that they're trying to work on, and just throwing in one of those no-oriented questions. And it feels awkward at first, but it's crazy powerful.
Yeah. Were you scared the first time you did it?
Oh yeah, because you just feel like this is you. It's like you're untraining. So much of this is like you're untraining all of the things that you've been told. Like you should ask yes questions and you should do it this way. And it sounds weird to say, hey, would it be impossible to do this? It's like, well, no, of course it's not impossible. Why are you asking? But yeah, it works.
Yeah, and then if there are issues on top of that, they'll tell you what the issues are. So it's cool. I mean, the implementation is great.
Mm-hmm. So another, I guess, one of these things that you have to untrain is this idea of the accusation audit, where it's like, hold on, I'm supposed to address all of the things that I think they think I'm doing wrong. Like that sounds crazy. So what is the accusation audit?
Yeah, and it gets back to the point you were asking me earlier about that fear of planting negatives.
Yes.
So the accusations audit really is just calling out the elephants in the room, the potential elephants in the room, the unfair elephants in the room, the imagined elephants in the room. If they were crazy and they were nuts and they were being horrible towards me, what would they be thinking? And it's a systematic way to systematic and proactively, deactivate negatives. What we found with the labels, we were talking about labels before, the dynamic that happens is labeling a negative diffuses it, diminishes it, takes some of the steam out of it, takes some of the air out of the wind out of the sails. I mean, it makes it smaller every time. And this is the one phenomenon that we've got actual neuroscience to back up. Multiple studies have been done that when people are feeling negative emotions and they simply identify what those emotions are, they diminish. You know, they call them out. They did a brain science experiment. They put people in fMRIs. They showed them pictures that made them think negative thoughts, and they watched the portion of their brain that lights up when we're thinking negative thoughts light up. And they simply just said, what are you feeling right now? A self-label, if you will. And when a person said sad, afraid, angry, lonely, whatever the negative emotion was, every single time they self-labeled, the electrical activity in that part of the brain diminished. Not some of the time, not half the time, not 80% of the time, every time. So you take this and you become proactive with it. You know, if you're, and the other side is always going to have some negative. I mean, if you want something from them, before we were talking about they're imagining a conflict in advance, because everybody does. And this imagined conflict creates defensiveness and fear and anger and a whole number of things. There's something there. Even if it's, you call them on the phone and they're annoyed because they get something else to do, or they're going to be afraid that the phone call is going to be a waste of time. You could start out with, you know, you're probably feeling right now this phone call is going to be a waste of time. Inside, because we're negative too, we're going to react like, oh my God, if I say that, they're going to go, aha, well, that it is. I wasn't thinking that, but now that you said it's going to be a waste of time, probably is, and they're going to hang up. That's what we imagine. And it's very much like the suicide analogy in hostage negotiation. We were taught to ask people if they were going to commit suicide. And initially we all reacted like, oh my God, I can't do that. We'll plant the idea in their head. Well, in point of fact, not only does it not plant the idea in their head, if it was never there, they say, no. No, I'm not thinking that, you know, no. Or if they were, they're relieved. They go like, oh God, you're the first person that was willing to actually recognize this with me, and they feel bonded to you. So there's no downside to calling out negatives in advance. And we call it the accusations audit, do an audit of what the other side might be thinking negatively, and bang, 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 call them all out one at a time.
And then you just let it sit, right? Like you don't diffuse them. You wait for, like, is it that you keep going until they stop you, or how do you do it in practice?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, you got to let it sit. Most people would want to approach, they would say, if they called it out, they might say, you know, you're probably concerned this phone call is going to be a waste of time, but it's not, for the following reasons. So at the moment that you would have said but, that's when you need to shut up, go dead silent. But is an erasing word, and your accusations audit is a very powerful skill, and you don't want to erase it. So don't erase it. Just go dead silent. So yes, how do you know when you've gone far enough? If the other side is staring at you with no reaction, that means you're on the right track and you haven't gone far enough. But you're on the right track. That's the good news. You know, a lack of response is there's more there. So your response would be, when you go dead silent, if they're still staring at you, would to label the dynamic, which there's more there. And you might say, sounds like I just hit the tip of the iceberg. Sound like there's more here than meets the eye. On the other hand, the other side might say like, all right, what do you got? Let's talk about it. Now you're in a good, they've just given you permission to proceed. They feel in control. They don't feel backed into a corner. Or if you've done a really great job, they're going to be like, no, you're being too hard on yourself. What do you want to talk about? I mean, that's really the platinum response. When the other side basically steps to your side and says, no, you're being a little hard on yourself. Because now you're collaborating. They're on your side of the table.
And this brings up the idea of like empathy versus agreement, where I think a lot of that worry is like, if you're in conflict with somebody, you don't want to be doing this accusation audit because you could think that you're just agreeing with everything they're saying, and you could think every single one of those points is unfair or wrong or inaccurate. So how do people separate that out? Because I mean, you were talking with terrorists and bank robbers and hostage takers. And so, you know, you're not agreeing with them, but you have to understand their worldview. Is that the idea?
That's a critical distinction. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because if you can define in your mind that empathy is not agreement, then you have just unleashed a limitless skill. You can be empathic with anybody. And I love skills that are unlimited. I mean, my company, the Black Swan Method, is about skills that are unlimited. And empathy is unlimited if you decouple it from agreement. And it was never meant to be agreement in the first place anyway. It's come to become a synonym for sympathy, agreement, or compassion in today's vernacular. And that's never the way it was originally designed. So a great example, you know, when I was an FBI agent, we put a lot of Muslim witnesses on the stand voluntarily against other Muslims. In particular, a Muslim cleric who was world renowned at the time and had been advocating for terrorism. And we put Muslims on the stand against him, and they testified voluntarily. How did we do that? Every single conversation I started with those Muslims, I would say, you believe that for the last 200 years, there's been a succession of American governments that have been anti-Islamic. And they would go like, yeah. And that would be the beginning of a great cooperation. Now, I never said it was true. You know, my words were extremely carefully chosen. You believe the following. I never said it was true. I never said it was fair. I never said it was unfair. I never said, but that's not the case. Now, I knew it wasn't the case, but I'm not going to defeat myself by stepping all over my skill. And I know what kind of an effect it was going to have on them. And every time they would be startled and they would move in my direction. And that's the way that we got cooperation in some of the most adversarial of beginnings of relationships, by simply recognizing how the other side felt.
And then that opens it up for, once you've done that, now you can bring your side into it, but they have to feel heard and understood before they're ever going to be open to that.
Now you can bring your side into it, or the interesting thing is it also creates an opening where they might bring your side into it on your behalf. I sat down with an ex-girlfriend a number of years ago. We'd had a very contentious relationship. And I was tired of fighting. I wanted to be friends. And when we sat down, you know, I just decided to be very, very aggressive in my application of empathy. So I took out the seems like, or you feel, and I just said, look, I know that you felt like I was an asshole the entire time we were together. And she just relaxed. And she said, I did a lot of stuff wrong myself. And I remember the time thinking, wow, if I'd have known that was going to be that easy, I'd have said that a long time ago.
So going into the name of your company, the Black Swan, and one of the stories that you use to highlight this is that of the tractor man. And as soon as I was reading that story, it reminded me of an episode of the show Lie to Me. Have you seen that show?
I've heard a lot about it.
It's about Paul Ekman, who does all like the lie detection, but there's an episode where it's virtually identical to this. And I imagine they just pulled it from this story. And so I'm thinking the lead character was you, but anyway, I would love to hear that story of the tractor man and kind of how that ties into uncovering these black swans.
Yeah, well, the tractor man thing was out of public domain, right? So they were free to borrow liberally from the stuff that was out there. Yeah, well, you know, it was a guy who was really kind of crushed by world circumstances. I mean, his family had a tobacco farm, and when all the states sued the tobacco companies a number of years ago in a tobacco settlement, a lot of tobacco farmers got crushed by that. It's not that far off from what we're going through today. I mean, nobody really did anything wrong economically, and there's been an external force that is crushing businesses all across the globe, and certainly across the United States. So it was an external force crushed the guy's family farm. The tobacco settlement put limits on raising tobacco and a lot of other stuff, and they lost their farm as a result. So the guy had been protesting in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years legally, and nobody cared. It's interesting. Decision-making process, there's always stuff that people tried before that didn't work and they felt they had to escalate. That is the decision-making process. So he legally protested on the mall is the area between the monuments in the center of DC, the big grassy area. Mm-hmm. And nobody cared. So he's like, I'm going to get their attention. He comes back to Washington, D.C. with his tractor. He claims he's got 4 bombs. He drives into one of the pools of water that are in the mall. Says, I'm going to blow the place up. And this is, as we're getting ready to go to war to Iraq, people are jumpy. Somebody might show up with bombs because we're getting ready to go to war. And so this guy just wanted attention. He didn't deserve to get killed. He put himself in a position to get killed. And thank God with the negotiation response collectively, myself and my colleagues, we saved this poor guy's life. But through the course of the conversation, one of the big lessons in that was, controlling the end of the conversation. He was hanging up on our negotiators on a regular basis abruptly. He would just hang up. So the way that we got control over the dynamic again was to gently make sure we controlled the ending and make it be polite. The last impression is the lasting impression. So we coached our negotiator, that U.S. Park Police negotiator we were coaching, said, make him stop hanging up on you without first telling you he's going to hang up. Say, if he's got to end the call, he can end the call, but just never hang up on you again. Get him to agree to never hang up on you again. Be polite at the end. And that wasn't an unreasonable request. He didn't know the psychological dynamic they were putting on him. We were controlling the end. People will let you control the end if you want it positively. People get upset when they end abruptly or the end is a cheap shot. When you're trying to get the last word in, it's a cheap shot at the end. But if you negotiate a positive ending, it will change everything. And it did. And that's how we got the upper hand. And we finally talked him out. And we talked him out before he got himself killed.
Amazing. So I have 2 more questions for you before we wrap up. So one of them, because I think this is a thing that
you need me to answer them briefly, right?
I need you to answer them briefly. But in this one, I think could be brief. But it's this idea of the illusion of control. And one of the YouTube videos of yours I was watching was somebody asked you the question. They were saying like, well, I want to stand up when I do my calls because I want to feel like I'm in power, right? And you went into it because you're like, that's just completely backwards. It's not about you feeling like you have power.
Yeah. And that's a sign of a poor, vulnerable, insecure human being. If like, they can't be confident and sit at the same time. That poor guy. But the secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. If you're a control freak negotiator, you are in fact insecure. You're nervous. You're afraid. Let the other side feel in control. Worry about the overall direction as opposed to, all right, so this went off on a tangent. I'm scared. I'm losing my way here. It's not going the way I want it to. Allow it to do that. Ask open-ended questions, what and how questions. Use labels. Don't try to corner people with yes questions. There's all these ways that are striving for control. That whole yes nonsense to begin with, the tie downs are about controlling the other side because you're afraid of what they might say. Boy, the minute you do that, you're losing the negotiation.
Perfect. And the last one for you. So what is one thing people can do today to start improving their communication and their negotiation in their life?
Try to hear the other side out to start with. Paraphrase them, summarize them, repeat what they've just said. At the beginning of every conversation, anybody says something to you, instead of it being your turn to talk, instead, just try to find a way to draw a little bit more out of them without making them feel contradicted. And in either one of the things that I just said now, summary, paraphrase, label, those are great ways to draw people out. Just see if the other side can't talk themselves into your position on their own with just the right kind of encouragement. Try that in your small stakes conversations. You're not going to be worried about losing control. And pretty much everybody you talk to is really going to enjoy talking with you.
Perfect. Chris, thank you so much for this. This was incredibly fun for me and incredibly valuable for everyone on here. where can people learn more about you and the Black Swan Group? I'm posting a resources right now for folks on the Black Swan page, where you can get the negotiation one sheet, the 3 business mistakes, and how to negotiate your salary. But what's the best place for people to learn about you and your business?
Look, we are one-stop shopping for negotiation. Now, the first thing to do is really subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out, it's free, it's complimentary, it's good price. So it's free, I'll take 3, is what an old friend of mine used to say. Tuesday mornings, short and sweet. Tuesday morning is when you're going to want to be ready to rock and roll. The way to subscribe to it, and again, it's free, it's concise, it's actionable. Send a message, Black Swan Method. 3 words, spaces between it, lowercase is fine. Black Swan message. Text that to the number 33777. 33777. 33777. You'll get a response back asking you for your email. Now, the newsletter is a gateway to everything. I mean, all the things that you just mentioned are on the website, which is blackswanltd.com. The newsletter will take you there when you click on the piece, should you choose to click on the piece. We've got an archive of previous negotiation strategies. You can Google them. You can find out anything tailored for what you're looking for. The other side has more power. You've got no leverage. You're in a job negotiation. We've written a post that's giving you advice that you can use. That's the first place to go. And I got to tell you something. We got a buffet. We got a smorgasbord. We got a banquet of negotiation resources for you to plug into, tailored for, you will find tailored for whatever you're looking for on our website, and the newsletter will take you in there.
Perfect. Yeah, the newsletter is awesome. I probably have a dozen of your worksheets and things like that downloaded on my computer. I use the negotiation one sheet all the time when I'm hopping on a call. So Chris,
Wow.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for all of the resources. You've changed my life. I think you're going to change a lot more lives. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your service.
Thank
Awesome.
you for having me on.
Of course. Thank you. Take care. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Chris, thank you. Bye-bye.